All right. Check, check, check. Sounds like we're good. I don't know what was going on there. Good morning. Good morning. Little glitch. Gosh, that seems super loud to me. Let me know how the sound is, guys. Is it okay, or not sure what's going on with my soundboard today? And I don't know why it's only, is it turned? It's the crazy thing. All right. Hopefully that's okay. I don't know why I'm only getting one bar on that. But it seems like if I go much higher, it kind of blows out on the recording end. Good morning. Sorry, I don't mean to be distracted. Starting a mini ball pit. Well, thank you so much. If you guys don't know what the ball pit is, there's a podcast called Chicks on the Right. Thank you, Kara. There's a podcast called Chicks on the Right, and I moderate that, and it's Monday through Friday mornings from 8 to about 9:45. They won't be on this Friday or coming Monday, but normally they are. And this is just a one-off because one of them's going out of town. But that's where the ball pit reference comes from. So if you're not enjoying that show, that's a good one. And if you're missing out on Robert Goivea has a great, oh, thank you, Gypsy. Robert Goivea has a great law podcast. It's called Watching the Watchers here on Rumble. He's also on YouTube, and he just does an excellent job breaking these cases down, and he's covering the Hunter Biden trial right now. So that should prove to be interesting. I hate that my mic is such that I cannot, hold on, I can't see the chat. Maybe if I turn it that way a little bit. All right, hopefully that's good. But anyway, what a busy weekend we had. Oh, man, I forgot. I was going to send the pictures over. So we took the kids and the grandkids all out on the boat this weekend, and it was such fun. We hadn't, I don't think we'd ever had any of them out on this boat. So we got this boat. Thank you, Mom and Dad Whitbro, when they passed away, with some of the money that they left us. Finally made it to alive, says Let's Get Sewing. Hi, sweetheart. I have to meet my husband at a dental appointment and bring him home for the day, so I may have to catch the last bit on replay. He's still in a nursing home and still can't. Oh, is he still having trouble with the one side? I'm so sorry. I continue to pray for him, so know that. I wish we could get faster resolution for him, but strokes are tough. It depends on what part of the brain, and there's just so much that plays into it. Neuro nursing. Oh, thank you. These are little headbands that go around, and so they're like sewn in a circle already, and then you just tie them. And I got them off Amazon, and I just thought they were so cute, very whimsical, but I like that kind of stuff. So we took the kids out on the boat, and they're very cute. And we took them tubing. And so this is the older two grandkids, Cole and Nora, and my son, David, their dad. And we did that. And then this is like Cole and Sophie. That's my daughter's daughter. I mean, are they so cute? And this is Atlas pretending he's flying. They had so much fun, you guys. There's Nora just enjoying the wind. Sophie. She's so cute. I guess we didn't get a full-on one of Atlas. That's a shame. But anyway, they had such a good time. So Sophie just turned 5, and Sophie, Atlas, Laura is my daughter, Jake is her husband. Plus, I have a son, Jake. But Sophie and Atlas and their mom and dad, they live in Ohio, about 5 hours away. And so they're trying to find work here so that they can move here, which would be awesome. And we just don't get to see them a lot. Laura's the one that's pregnant, and her baby's due July 22nd, little boy. And they came down, and so we took them out on the boat, and that was super fun. And then we went and had barbecue together after. It was just such a great time as a family. And so it was Laura and Jake and their kids, and David and Madeline and their kids, and Nora and Cole. And it was a good time. The kids played together, and there's a big age difference. So Cole, is he 12 yet? No, Cole will be 12 on my birthday. And Nora's getting ready to turn 9. And then the little ones are 5 and almost 7. And so it's just amazing, just watching them. And Sophie's just so little, and she looks just like her mom looked when she was little. And so she gets out on the tube with her dad, and she's a little daredevil, right? So we're going and we're trying to go easy because she's just little. And, she's go up, go up, go up. And so we were flying with her on that thing. And her mom's like, okay, that's fast enough. That's fast. And of course, Laura couldn't go out because she's very pregnant. Couldn't go out on the tube. And then we put Atlas out there, and Atlas was really scared because apparently the last time he went out on a tube, not with us, the nose of it went down. So if you've never towed a tube behind your boat or you don't have a boat, if the tie's not up real high on the boat, as you pull off, the nose of it will go down and you have to slide way back on the tube. Otherwise, you get a face full of water. So that happened to him the first time. Well, our boat sits way, way up in the water. And so it wasn't any problem. But so he had fun, and we threw my son David and my son-in-law Jake off the tube, which is always fun, just to watch bodies go flying. We drug Dave for a while. I don't know why he wouldn't let go of the tube, but we drug him for a little while. And Madeline didn't go out, none of us older girls went out. But it was still a lot of fun. And then that was Saturday. Then Sunday, we drove up to Lexington because Cole had a baseball game and they're in a tournament. And it is just incredible to see how much he's improved from last year. So he played last year and he was just learning. So he wasn't very good. And then Don paid for him to have some baseball lessons, private baseball lessons. And now he's playing this year. And that kid is a base stealing fiend. I mean, if he could steal a base, he's going to do it. And he loves to slide, which is just so fun to watch. To me, that's besides the hitting, which he's pretty good at. The base stealing and the sliding are just the best part. And so that was great. They won their game, and then I think their last game is this weekend, so we'll go to that. But it just was a great weekend with family. And so if you guys would just keep Jake and Laura in your prayers, that Jake would be able to find a job here that would have, that they could afford to live here. Their rent is significantly lower. They live in a really, really small town in Ohio, and their rent's like maybe $600 a month. And to move here, it's going to probably almost triple. And so he's got to be able to make money to afford that. But it would be, I've got a Robin, like running a marathon, like marathon speed across the railing of the deck. So if you guys would just remember them in prayer, and hopefully that will come to pass, because it would be so nice to have my new grandbaby so close and the kids and all of that. I keep telling him that it's like making a path in the grass. You have to walk over it many times to make the path, and grow brain cells takes time. It takes a lot of time, and relearning that muscle memory that kind of gets shocked after a stroke takes a lot of time. And I think people get this idea that, if it's not all back in the first 6 months, it's not coming back. And I think John Fetterman showed us that's not true. I did not expect to see as much improvement in John as we've seen. I mean, it's like his brain is working like a normal conservative now, and he's a Democrat. So if nothing gives you hope, that ought to give you hope. Good morning, Lynn. Oh, thank you. So yeah, it was a great weekend and just so good for the soul. And the other thing was that Don took Jake, my son-in-law, not Jake, my son, Jake, my son-in-law, and Cole to the batting cage. And so he loved that. So while he was taking them to the batting cage, we took the rest of the Grandies, Laura and I did, to Crank and Boom and had ice cream. So that was very fun. But just good. I mean, we just haven't had a really busy family weekend since the kids were home. Because, Laura lives so far away, and we had all that COVID, and it just felt so normal and so good. And you guys know what that's like, just getting those moments back that are just supposed to be a regular part of life. But we lost so much of that during COVID, and like I said, with the kids moving. But yeah, just great. And if you missed Friday night's show, I don't know if everybody here saw Friday night's show, but Friday night's show was great. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. It just was great. Everybody was super down about the whole conviction thing. And it was basically just a pep talk show and encouraging everybody to not give up and to be strong. And we just had a bunch of really fun clips. If you're watching on YouTube, that show's not on YouTube because we had a lot of music in it. So you can, if you go to there's a little short video on my YouTube telling you that that show's not going to be on YouTube, and in the description there is the link to Rumble, and so you can come over to Rumble and watch it. But yeah, it was a really, really fun show. We're going to have a good show this week. I bought I don't think it's in here. I must have moved it. I bought a prison jumpsuit. So, the orange like scrubs. It says prisoner on it. I got to see if Don can put political above prisoner for me. And I bought that to wear on my Friday shows to show that I stand with President Trump. So you're going to be seeing a lot of orange. I might not wear it every show, but I'm going to use it quite a bit. Just as a show of solidarity. If what he did is makes him a convicted felon, then we're probably all convicted felons. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Um, it was a good show. It was just a lot of fun. The music really helped, and everybody that was just feeling really black pilled and super burned out by the news seemed to really just at the end of it. I got a lot of feedback on Friday's show, emails and stuff, and people just really appreciated it. They just felt like it lifted their spirits and gave them hope and more fuel for the fight. And that's really what we need, isn't it? More fuel for the fight, because this fight is it just seems like it's never going to be over. And I pray that things turn this election season, because if they don't, I'm going to be doing a lot of pep talks to try to get us through, because things are just so dark right now. But definitely go back and watch that. If you have not caught all of the episodes of Shane, if you go into Rumble via a web browser, I don't know if it's on the app yet, but if you go in via web browser, you can go to my Nurse Penny page or channel and go to playlists, and every book we've read is in a separate playlist, and you can just start playing through them. And I did fix that on YouTube as well. So now on YouTube, you can also go through the playlist or go into the playlist, and each book has every episode in its own playlist. And so that'll make it a lot easier for you to get through. And I changed a lot of the thumbnails for uniformity. So spent a lot of time last week cleaning up YouTube, because I just kind of neglect that platform because I hate giving them my content. And we just don't, despite thousands of subscribers, I think, we just don't get a lot of views on YouTube since I made a vaccine faux pas like a year ago. It wasn't really a faux pas, it was true, but I had a ton of views before that. And now if I get 100 views on a video, it's shocking. And, before I was getting like 2,000 something. It was a new channel, but still. I think I can splash coffee all over me. All right. So we are back to Shane, and let's see what chapter we're on. I can't see. I got contact lenses and they're not right. I have to go back. I spent like 2 hours in there saying, no, this one, the distance is good. And this one, the reading is good, but the distance is bad. You know what I mean? Just crossways. It's not good. So I'm going to try to go back today and get them to adjust them. Okay, so we are on chapter 22. Jess and Shane crossed into the panhandle of Texas 3 days later. Shadow had stayed with them the entire way. They were camped about a mile off the trail near a stream and some trees that would provide them cover. Jess was cooking the last of their food supplies, and Shane was taking care of the horses, tethering them between two trees so they could feed off the lush grass. So if you guys missed last week, Denoyer and Augie are gone. They parted ways once they got the last bad guys and got their money for that. And now Jess has partnered up with a guy named Shane, who is wanted for killing the sheriff's deputy. But he only killed the sheriff's deputy because the sheriff's deputy drew on him first, and he hadn't done anything wrong. So some bad guys accused him of murdering somebody, I think, and he didn't really do it. So Jess and Shane are now hooking up, and they're going after these guys to find out who really killed these people that Shane is supposed to have killed, that he didn't. All right. Jess was cooking the last of their food supplies, and Shane was taking care of the horses, tethering them between two trees so they could feed off the lush grass. After a hot meal, Jess was busy stringing his cans around their perimeter. Shane watched him with keen intent. "Do you put them up every time you make camp out on the trail?" he asked, when Jess finished and came back to the fire to pour some coffee into his cup. "Yeah, pretty much." "What if you can't find any cover and have to make camp out in the open?" "I don't camp out in the open often, but when I have to, I push sticks in the ground if possible and tie them to those. If not, I don't sleep much." "You're one curious man, I'll give you that." "Like you said, you can't be too careful when you live by the gun." "I do say that," said Shane as he stood up to go and relieve himself. Shadow, who had been curled up at the foot of Jess's bedroll, stood up on all fours and watched him walk to some bushes. When Shane came back to the fire, Shadow curled up again, but still watched his every move. "When do you think Shadow will finally trust me as a friend?" Jess leaned over and scratched his furry head. He licked his hand. "I don't know," said Jess. "He has his own ways, I reckon." "Well, we should hit the town of Spruce by tomorrow." "I figured that too, and we need to supply up again," said Jess. "Hopefully we can find the Adair brothers and get them to confess to what really happened on the train that day." "You really think they'll confess?" "I do." "What if they refuse to change their story?" "You let me worry about that." "You seem pretty confident." "I am." They finished drinking the coffee while exchanging small talk until dusk started to settle in. Jess doused the fire and they both climbed in their bedrolls. When Shane got up in the middle of the night, he saw Shadow standing up and watching his every move. Shane turned around, buttoned his pants, and smiled at Shadow. "You're as cagey as your owner," he whispered to him. Jess didn't move his hat off his face when he spoke. "Don't worry, he won't attack unless he thinks you're doing something to hurt me." "I thought you were asleep," Shane said as he crawled into his bedroll again. "Like you said, I'm a cautious man," Jess said, through a yawn under his hat. They trotted into the town of Spruce, Texas, in the latter part of the afternoon. Jess and Shane rode along the main street in town. Shadow walked alongside Sharps and garnered the attention of more than one of the local residents. When they reined up by the jail, they both dismounted and walked up the steps to the front door, which was locked. Jess was peering through a window. I thought it said peeing. I'm like, that would be weird. Jess was peering through a window when one of the residents came over to them. "If you're looking for Marshall Rowlett, he ain't back yet," said the man. "He's out with a posse chasing after the Adair brothers." "A posse?" asked Jess. "Yeah, them two some bitches robbed the bank 2 days ago," he said. "They got over $10,000 and killed the bank manager." The conversation was suddenly interrupted by a group of men riding into town. "That's the posse, and it looks like the marshal got himself shot," said the man. He stepped off the boardwalk and over to the posse that was heading for the doctor's office. Jess and Shane watched as the men helped the marshal out of his saddle and walked him into the office. Jess glanced over at Shane. "Let's get our horses fed and watered. Do the same for ourselves and then go talk to the marshal," he suggested. Shane looked up at the sun as it started to make its downward movement over the horizon. "Maybe we should get rooms for the night and supply up in the morning," he suggested. "Maybe you're right, especially after what's happened now," agreed Jess. "That posse came back empty-handed." They walked their horses to the livery and stabled them. Shadow headed behind the livery and quickly disappeared. They carried their things to the only saloon on the main street. The Double Delt Saloon stood 2 stories tall. The whitewash was fading badly from the effects of the sun and lack of maintenance. They got rooms on the second floor across from each other and put their things inside. Jess walked out of his room, locked the door, and knocked on Shane's. He opened it and came out. "Let's get a bite to eat and then see the marshal," said Jess. They headed down the steps to the saloon level to find the place busy, noisy, and smoke-laden. It reeked of body odor and the smell of tobacco juice from spittoons that hadn't been emptied recently. They ordered some hot food and stood at the bar eating. The owner and barkeep slowly moved along the bar until he reached them. "If you boys came to join the posse, you're too late," he said. "Marshal Rowlett took a bullet to his chest, and he'll be out of commission for a few weeks. Doc's keeping him in the bed over at his place." "We didn't come to join the posse. We were already on the hunt for Stewart and Jim Adair when we rode in," explained Jess. "Them boys are long gone by now," he cackled. "I'm Jeb Tatro, by the way." "I'm Jess Williams, and this is Harvey Shane." "I know the name Jess Williams good enough, but I never heard of a Harvey Shane," he admitted. "I haven't been back to Texas for some time now," he said as he glanced at Jess, who was grinning back at him. "Nice to meet you, Jeb, but we have to go and speak with the marshal," said Jess as he plopped a $5 gold piece on the bar. Jeb picked it up and smiled. "Need change?" he asked. "Nope." "I heard tell you was a generous man," he said as he pocketed the coin. Jess and Shane headed for the doctor's office. When they walked in, the doctor was sitting behind a desk reading a newspaper. He glanced up and his eyes widened when he saw who it was. "Well, tie my shoes together and push me down a hill if it ain't Jess Williams standing right there in front of me," he said in a deep, booming voice. "We're here to speak with the marshal if he's willing and able," said Jess. "Oh, he'll want to talk to you for sure," he said as he stood up. "One of them Adair boys put a heavy caliber slug in his chest. I'm sure he'd want to know that the best bounty hunter in the business is right here in town. Follow me." They followed the doctor to a little room in the back of the office where Marshal Rowlett lay in a small bed with his head propped up. His eyes were closed and the doctor shook his arm to wake him. When he opened his eyes and saw Jess standing at the foot of the bed, a smile slowly curled up on his lips. "I'll be danged," he mumbled in a weak voice. "My prayers have been answered." Chapter 23. "So let me get this straight. You two were already looking for the Adair brothers?" asked Rowlett. "Yeah. It seems they identified the wrong man involved in a train robbery where the conductor was shot dead," explained Jess. "We need to find them and make them tell the truth about who really did it." "I can't imagine either of those two helping the law in any way." "I think they had a good reason," said Jess. "What could that possibly be?" "They identified Shane here as the one who committed the crimes." The marshal looked at Shane. "Harvey Shane, where have you been the last year or so?" "I moved out to Texas and into Colorado to stay out of his sights," he replied as he jerked his thumb at Jess. "And yet here you are and obviously working with Williams," he said, weakly as he tried to chuckle. The pain stopped him. "Yep, who would have thought it," admitted Shane. "Well, we was tracking them boys and they was heading on a southeast trail," explained Rowlett. "We were heading toward a stand of trees when I received a slug from a heavy caliber rifle, probably from a Sharp's Big 50 by the look of the slug the doc took out of me. Both those brothers were sharpshooters in the war between the states, and they still carry their rifles with them wherever they go. They're expert shooters, both of them, and they love to ambush people from a distance. So if you go after 'em, you best be extra careful or you end up like me." "I'm always careful," said Jess. "How far did you follow them?" "We were about 5 miles from the town of Tenor when I got shot. I'd hazard a guess that they went to that town to supply up. Them boys are mean enough to steal a fly from a blind spider, but they're as dumb as a lead slug." "All right, then. We'll head out in the morning and start tracking them," said Jess. "One of the men in the posse runs a newspaper in town. He's printing up some new wanted poster on those two. I'm raising the bounty to $2,000 each. You might want to get copies of them in the morning before you head out, because I'm also placing a dead or alive warrant on their heads after they killed the bank manager." Jess grinned at Rowlett. That makes my job much easier, he said, as he glanced over at Shane. You need to know about one of the other men who rode with the posse, Rowlett said as he looked directly at Jess. His name is Godfrey Munn. He's made it known more than once that he has a beef with you. Something about killing a cousin of his, I think. He keeps his temper under control most of the time, but when he gets some whiskey in him, there's no telling what he might try. Is he still in town? Asked Jess. Yeah, most likely at the Double Delt right now, getting a gut full of whiskey. Thanks for the warning, Marshal. Will you do me a favor? Asked Rowlett. Sure. What? Asked Jess. After those two are dead, send me a wire to let me know where they're buried so I can piss on their graves for this, he said with meaning as he pointed to the bloody bandage on his chest. Sure thing, Marshal, said Jess as he and Shane sauntered out to the front of the office where the doctor sat. He looked up at them. Did he warn you about Munn? He did, said Jess. He wasn't kidding, in case you was wondering about it, he said as he raised his eyebrows. Thanks, Jess said as he and Shane walked out the front door. You worried about this Munn fella? Asked Shane as they stood on the front porch staring at the Double Delt saloon. I'm only worried he might end up dead for no good reason. You want to find another saloon over on one of the other streets in town? Nah, our paths will cross again sooner or later, and I don't like the waiting part, he said as he stepped off the porch and headed straight for the Double Delt. Shane watched him for a few seconds. Not one to run from trouble, I see, he muttered to himself as he stepped off the porch and followed behind. Gotta like a man like that. Or gotta like that in a man. When Jess reached the front of the saloon, Shadow appeared at the opening between the saloon and the next building over. He had a rabbit clenched in his teeth. He dropped it on the ground, jumped on the boardwalk, and snaked his way under the bat wings before Jess pushed through them. The barkeep, Jeb, saw Jess and shook his head slowly as he nodded his head to his left. Jess glanced over in that direction as he moved slowly up to the bar. He saw a man sitting at a table by himself with a brooding expression on his face as he watched Jess move through the room toward the bar. When he and Shane reached it, they ordered whiskey. The barkeep huffed and set 2 glasses on the bar and filled them. Old Godfrey Munn is on the prod, he warned. He mentioned your name a few times since he found out you was in town. He's all out of sorts after returning from the posse without the Adair brothers. I think he just wanted to kill something or someone. How did he know I was in town? Word travels fast round here. I might have mentioned something about it, he said with a slight look of embarrassment taking over his face. All of a sudden there was some commotion as a man hollered out angrily. Get out of here, you mangy cur, yelled a man as he lifted his leg to kick Shadow in the rump. Shadow spun his head around and clamped his jaws on the man's boot and started yanking him out of his chair. The place went silent for a few seconds, but then a dozen or so men started pulling their pistols out. Shoot this crazy cur, yelled the man as Shadow pulled him clean out of his chair. His rear hit the floor hard and he kept trying to kick at Shadow, but when he did, the wolf would pull him another foot along the dust-covered floor. Jess reached behind him, pulled out one of his cut-down shotguns, and fired one barrel at the ceiling. The loud explosion froze everyone's movement. Anybody who shoots my wolf gets a bullet from me, Jess warned everyone in the place. Shadow let go of the man's boot and wove his way through the crowd until he stood next to Jess. You'd better get that wolf out of here before one of us shoots him, said an unknown voice from the crowd. Jess turned halfway toward the barkeep. Get him a large chunk of meat and bring it out here to him, Jess told him as he kept watching the crowd. Jeb went into the kitchen and came out with a chunk of meat the size of a small man's head. He threw it to Shadow, who snatched it midair with his jaws before looking up at Jess. Go on outside and eat that, boy, Jess said. Shadow headed for the batwings, ducking underneath them before disappearing from view. Jess reloaded the one chamber of the shotgun and slid it back into place behind his left hip. "Free drinks for everybody on me," Jess said loudly. There were cheers and whistles as Jeb grabbed 2 bottles of whiskey and ran around filling empty glasses. When he reached Godfrey Munn, he turned his glass upside down. "I ain't drinking whiskey bought by the man who killed my cousin," he hollered loud enough for Jess to hear. Jeb shrugged his shoulders and filled some more glasses. Munn slowly stood up, glaring at Jess. "You killed my cousin," he said as he threw the empty glass at Jess, who simply dodged it by moving his head. The glass shattered on the wall behind him, and the place got so quiet they could hear a mouse fart. "I take it you're not thirsty anymore?" Jess asked. "Oh, I'm thirsty, all right," he blustered drunkenly. "I'm thirsty for blood. Your blood." "Then I've got good news and bad news for you," he said bluntly. "What news?" he asked. "The good news is that you can walk out of here right now, and I'll forget all about it." "And the bad news?" he inquired. "I don't plan on losing any blood today." Chapter 24. Munn slowly made his way around tables and men until he was only 6 feet away from where Jess stood at the bar. Jess saw the dangling hammer strapped by his pistol. Munn's hand moved closer to the butt of it as his lips curled up into a hateful sneer. "You killed my cousin last year," Munn said before he spat some tobacco juice on the floor. "You keep saying that, but I killed a lot of men last year," said Jess. "You'll have to be a little more specific." "You probably don't even remember his name." "Maybe, maybe not," he admitted. "I just killed a man back in Spruce, and I have no idea who he was or why he tried to kill me. It happens more often than you think." "Someone's got to pay for it, and that someone is you," growled Munn as he shoved his left index finger out at him. The batwing doors swung open, caused by Shadow shoving his head between them. He slowly inched his way closer to Munn, his fangs bared as he growled gutturally at him. Munn swiveled his head around and was startled by the size of Shadow. "You'd best call off that beast before I put a bullet in him," threatened Munn. "If you try to pull out that smoke wagon to shoot him, I guarantee he'll be on you before you clear leather," cautioned Jess. Shadow stepped closer and growled louder, parting his front lips to expose more of his long, heavy front fangs that still had blood on them from eating the raw meat. "You call him off, mister," said Munn as he put his right hand on the butt of his pistol. Jess kept staring at Munn when he spoke. "Shadow, go on back out and finish your meal," he told him calmly. Shadow's lips closed together as he stopped growling. He looked at Munn through his bright green eyes, and then he quickly opened and shut his mouth. Munn flinched as he heard the heavy fangs clunking together like a steel trap. The wolf turned and started walking toward the batwings, but he stopped before he went through them. He swiveled his head back and growled once more at Munn before heading out and disappearing again. "That dang wolf is dangerous," said Munn. "Then you should consider how dangerous I am," advised Jess. "I'm not afraid of you." "Maybe you should be." "I'm going to take your life just like you took the life of my cousin." "Listen, Munn, 'cause I'm only telling you once. You can't beat me." "How can you be so sure?" "I just am, and you've been drinking too much to even try." "So I should just walk out and let you get away with it?" "Yeah, you should," said Jess as he tilted his head slightly. Munn stood there for a whole minute, thinking about what he'd do next. Then he slowly turned around and headed for the batwing doors. Jess stood there shaking his head. "Don't do what I think you're going to do," he whispered to himself as he saw Munn's right hand rising up to the butt of his pistol. He took one more step and wheeled around as he clawed at his pistol, only to be knocked back 2 steps from the slug that punched a hole through his left arm. He screamed through clenched teeth, spittle flying from his lips as he did. His pistol was still in his right hand and cocked. His eyes locked on Jess's as hate and anger stormed across his face. "You son of a bitch," he snarled as he lifted his pistol, only to be shoved back toward the wall as the two slugs from Jess's pistol twisted him one way and then another before slamming him hard against the wall. His eyes glazed over as he slid down, leaving a heavy blood smear as he did. Jess sighed loudly as he walked over and towed him. He replaced the spent shells in his pistol, and Shadow walked under the bat wings and sniffed the body. He looked up at Jess before turning around and going back outside. Shane walked over to him. "How'd you know he was going to do it?" His eyes were screaming it. "Well, I say we get some shut-eye and head out in the morning," said Shane. "Sounds good to me," Jess said. He holstered his pistol as the Merchant of Death came in to claim the body. Stewart and Jim Adair had ridden hard since they had successfully ambushed a Marshal Lockhart's posse. They rode behind a rocky ledge that, was off the trail just outside of Tenor and quickly set up camp for the night. Stewart was cooking some bacon while Jim took care of the horses. They sat down to eat while the coffee was boiling. "I wonder if the marshal made it," said Jim as he chewed with his mouth full. "I know I hit him," bragged Stewart, "but I'm not sure it was enough to put him down for good. That was one hell of a long shot from where we was hiding in those trees. If he ain't dead, he's sure to be laid up for a while." "Serves a sumbitch right for coming after us." "Well, brother, we got $10,000. When we get to Mexico, we can drink, eat, and enjoy those beautiful Mexican gals. We have to keep riding hard. We turned southwest after we crossed that river to hide our tracks." "That marshal ain't coming for us again," huffed Stewart, as he chewed on another slice of bacon. "But we need some food supplies. We can stop in Tenor tomorrow morning. You make sure you clean that rifle real good before hitting the hay." Stewart nodded as he chewed. A small piece of bacon escaped his lips and fell on the ground between his feet. He picked it up, blew the dirt off it, and popped it back into his mouth. Jess was finished with packing his saddlebags full of supplies, and Shadow was making quick work of a few thick steaks Jess had bought in the store. Shane walked out with a few more cans of peaches. He looked down at Shadow, who looked up at him as he put his huge paw on the steak as if he was saying, "Don't touch it." Shane shook his head and stepped off the boardwalk. "Dang wolf eats better than we do sometimes." He chuckled as he stuffed the cans into his saddlebags. "He's worth every penny of it," said Jess as he watched Shadow finish the last of the raw meat. The two climbed up in the saddle and Jess looked at Shadow. He stood up, tilted his head, and was licking his chops with his tongue. "Good morning, Chris Williams." "Shadow, we're going to have to ride hard to catch up to those two, so you might have to find us later." The wolf barked once and wagged his tail. "Did you get the newly printed wanted posters?" asked Shane. "Yep, got 'em right here in my pocket," he said as he turned his horse toward where the posse had ridden back in. He pointed to the set of tracks. "We'll follow these back to where the marshal said he was ambushed," he said as he looked in the direction they needed to go in. "All right, lead the way," said Shane. "I hope that horse of yours can keep up," said Jess as he urged Gray into a gallop, following the tracks left by the posse. Shane gigged his horse and followed. His horse was fast, but he still fell behind in the first minute. "I might have to buy me a new horse," he muttered as he put his neckerchief up over his nose and mouth to keep the dust out. Chapter 25. Jess kept pushing his horses hard. Shadow fell out of sight, and Shane was a few miles behind, following the tracks and what little he could see of the dust cloud left by Gray and Sharps. When Shane finally reached the camp that Jess had already set up, his horse was plumb tuckered out and ready to give out. Shane climbed out of the saddle and stretched. "I'm going to need to get a better steed," he said, as he took care of his horse, loosening the cinch wrap and brushing some of the dried sweat off the horse's neck with some fresh-picked grass. Jess looked over at the horse. "Yeah, he needs to be put out to pasture," he advised. "First chance we get, you need to buy a sturdy mount that can keep up." "I don't know if I'll find a horse that can keep up with these two," Shane said as he rubbed Sharp's neck. "I run mine long and hard on a regular basis to keep them in the best shape. Plus, they were long horses to begin with. The man who gave them to me breeds and selects only the finest horseflesh. Then he trains them to run long distances without dropping." Shane walked to the fire and stirred the beans and ham in the skillet. "I'm starving," he said, as he got his plate and scooped out some of it. "We should be able to reach the spot where the Adair brothers ambushed the posse by tomorrow afternoon," said Jess. "Well, do me a favor. Slow down enough for me to at least see you." "All right, but we can't lose sight of the tracks. Eventually we'll get rain, and then our job will get much harder." "So why do you think they keep heading southeast?" "I don't know," answered Jess. "Maybe they have a certain place in mind, or maybe they're just trying to throw off anyone following them." Shane finished his meal and pulled out a thin cheroot and lit it. "This bounty hunting business is hard work," he said, as he let the smoke slowly filter from his nose as he sipped his coffee. "I'm used to sitting in a chair and making my money playing poker." "It's hard to work out on the trail for weeks on end, only stopping when you need to supply up," admitted Jess. "I've even had times when I've tracked someone slowly at night with only moonlight to guide me and my horses. Well, just so you know, once we find the Adair brothers, I'm going back to gambling for a living." "That's good, because I like to work alone most of the time," Jess said as he got up to string his cans around the perimeter. They finished the coffee and crawled into their bedrolls. In the middle of the night, Jess shoved his hat off his face when he felt Shadow curling up at the foot of his bedroll. He rolled his massive head over onto Jess's feet and stayed there looking at Jess. "Too bad you can't ride a horse, Shadow," Jess said. The wolf lifted his head and licked his chops a few times before curling back up. The next morning found them sitting in the saddle while looking around at all the tracks on the ground. Jess slipped from the saddle and walked around, examining every detail. He saw the dried blood on the ground where the marshal had been shot. He followed the two sets of tracks that were very faint now, heading toward a grouping of trees about 300 yards out from where they were. Jess pointed to the spot. "They must have been waiting in those trees," he said, as he turned to walk back to his horses. He climbed up in the saddle and nudged Gray into a slow gallop. When they reached the trees, they both dismounted and Jess walked into them. He looked around until he found what he was looking for. A branch had been cut and stuck in the ground with a crook on the top of it. It had been cut with a knife to support a rifle for shooting while on one's stomach. He looked for the empty .50 caliber shell, but it was nowhere to be found. He stood up and looked over at Shane, who was kicking a few empty cans around. "They didn't remove the spent shell from the rifle," said Jess. "What does that mean?" "It means they never planned to take more than one shot. Their plan was to shoot once and make their getaway, while the posse was in disarray trying to find out where the shot came from. My guess is by the time the posse helped the marshal and got control of their horses, the brothers were already riding away at a fast clip. They took the single shot, jumped on their horses, and left." "Okay, but which way?" asked Shane. Jess bent over and examined the boot prints in the soft, grassy ground. He followed them to where they had left their horses, and then followed the two sets of tracks until they came out the other side of the trees. He spun on his heels and went back to where Shane was still standing. "They had 1 can of beans and 1 can of peaches," Shane said as he towed a can. "They must be low on supplies, which means they'll have to stop somewhere and supply up." I found their tracks where they left out of here, said Jess. They're still heading southeast. There's a town called Tenor in that direction, where they probably stopped. How much of a lead do you think they have on us? Not sure, maybe a day or two, depending on how good their horses are and how hard they've been pushing them. By the looks of the tracks leaving here, they were riding pretty hard. All right then, let's get moving. Hopefully I can get me a better horse and Tenor, said Shane as they walked back to their horses and climbed up in the saddles. Chapter 26. No one really paid much attention to the two men riding into Tenor in the early morning hours. The Adair brothers rode their horses lazily along Main Street, heading for the first livery they spotted. When they dismounted by the livery doors, a young man walked out, wiping his hands on his apron. These horses look like they need a rest and some good feed, he said as he looked them over. Actually, we need to trade them in for new ones, said Jim. I've got over a dozen mounts you can choose from, the man said. Just go out back to the corral, pick 'em out, and I'll make a deal with you on the price. You got a marshal in town? Asked Stewart. The man shook his head. Not at the moment. The county sheriff is taking care of the law business until they can find a replacement, but he hasn't sent a deputy here for some time now. Needs to, though. We've been getting more drifters coming through town lately. No offense. We ain't here to cause no trouble, said Jim. Just need fresh horses, some supplies, and a hot meal. Then we'll be on our way. Heading down to Mexico to spend some time with the ladies there. The two men went out the back door of the livery and looked at the horses in the corral. They picked out new mounts and informed the livery worker, who gave them a price that included taking their horses in trade. A bill of sale was made. Money changed hands, and soon after that, the two brothers were sitting in a cafe, eating ham and eggs. They both had their saddlebags at their feet, with their share of the money from the bank robbery in them. When they finished, they collected their fresh mounts from the livery and took them to the general store. They went in and started picking things off the shelves. While they were packing their saddlebags, Jim kept looking over at a saloon that seemed to be calling his name. He licked his lips and looked over the saddle at Stewart. How about we get one drink before we leave town? He asked. Nah, but I'll go for two. As they walked toward the saloon, two men came sauntering out through the swinging doors. They looked like drifters, shabbily dressed and dirty, but they both wore 6-guns tied down tight and low. Jim and Stewart stopped in the middle of the street, cautiously eyeballing the two men. The man on the boardwalk to their right narrowed his eyes at them, and then a wry smile slowly formed on his lips. He elbowed his partner, who was chewing on a piece of hay that dangled from his lips. Hey, partner, guess who they are? He drawled almost in a whisper. Dunno, said his partner. They're the Adair brothers, he said. They got a bounty on their heads, and here they are, right in front of us. So maybe we could try to collect on it, he said. Jim looked up at them with a malevolent expression on his face. I don't know what you two are whispering about, but you'd best be out of our way, he said as he slipped his hammer strap off his colt. I'll make a deal with you, said the one man. What? Asked Stewart as he removed his hammer strap. You give us $50 and we'll be on our way, he said. I'll tell you what, threatened Jim. I'll give you 45, as in 45 caliber slug to your stomach. That's not being very neighborly, seeing as how you two are worth 500 apiece, scolded the other man. You don't pay us something, we'll ride to the county sheriff's office and tell him we seen you here. I don't think you're going to make it to the county sheriff's office, hissed Jim as he jerked for his pistol. The two men on the boardwalk in front of the saloon pulled their pistols out and started fanning them. Both Jim and Stewart were firing back. After the hail of lead stopped, and when the heavy smoke started to clear, Jim had a flesh wound on his right leg, and Stewart was untouched. The two men on the boardwalk, however, were both hit twice. They bent over and dropped their pistols. Stewart still had one round in his pistol, and Jim had none. Stewart quickly shoved fresh rounds in and walked up to the boardwalk where the two men were on their backs now, holding onto their wounds with blood-covered hands. Jim watched as he replaced the spent shells in his pistol. One of them looked up at Stewart imploringly. Doctor, he wheezed. Stewart glanced out at him with his lips parted. How about the devil instead? He said as he aimed the pistol at the man's head and pulled the trigger. The slug entered just below his left eye. The body stiffened and then became stone still. The other man was attempting to shield himself with his outstretched hands. No, please don't, he wailed as Stewart fired again. The slug burned straight through the man's heart. His head slowly fell to the side as he let out his death rattle. Jim walked up to them and holstered his pistol. Stewart looked at the blood on his brother's leg where the slug had torn a hole in his pants. How bad you hit? Just a flesh wound, Jim said. I'll be fine. The two looked around the town and saw no one looking back at them. Stewart holstered his pistol and smiled evilly. I say we still have time for those drinks, 'cause there ain't no one in town who gives a dang about these two, he said. I agree, said Jim. They walked into the saloon to find it empty, except for the lone barkeeper behind the bar. Stewart put $2 silver on the bar and glared coldly at him. Good whiskey, and make it quick, he snarled. The barkeep poured 2 glasses of whiskey with shaky hands. They had 2 drinks, picked up the bottle, and walked out of the saloon. Once outside, doors and windows quickly slammed shut. Drapes slowly fluttered to the closed position. They stepped over the 2 dead bodies and strolled across the street to their horses. After climbing up in the saddle, they rode casually out of town, taking sips of the whiskey as they passed the bottle back and forth. They rode leisurely until they reached the river, where they walked their horses in the water for almost 5 miles before riding out and heading straight southwest toward Mexico. Before nightfall, they made camp and cooked a hot meal. Jim cleaned and patched the minor flesh wound on his right leg. Stewart watched him as he sipped from the whiskey bottle. I think we're in the clear, brother, he said. Jim's head snapped up. Don't start thinking that already, he cautioned. We have wanted posters circulating on us. I wouldn't be surprised if they upped the bounty after we killed that bank manager in Spruce. We still have to be careful when going into any town for supplies. Tenor was different. No law in town and no one there who was going to pick up a gun and stop trouble. I guess you know better, being that you're the oldest, admitted Stewart. Too bad our younger brother Lee didn't listen to my advice, said Jim. He'd still be alive today. Damn that Harvey Shane, grumbled Stewart. That's all right, brother. He'll get what's coming to him sooner or later, after we got that bounty put on his head, he bragged. Stewart grunted and pictured his brother, Lee. I reckon, he said sullenly as he stared at the fire, wondering where Shane was now, smiling inwardly at the fact that he was on the lam from the law, just like they were. Chapter 27. I can't remember how many chapters this has. 27. No, quite a bit. 27. What did we start at 22 today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. Maybe we read 2 more and we'll leave the rest for next week. They hadn't ridden more than a mile from the ambush spot when Jess suddenly slowed his horses down to a walk. Shane rode up next to him and pulled his neckerchief down from his nose. I know I asked you to slow down some, but not this slow, he said. Don't act suspicious, but we're being watched, explained Jess as he kept his head looking straight while lifting his eyes up to the left. Shane kept his head down and did the same. He saw 2 Indians sitting on ponies on a small rise watching them. I thought all Indians were on the reservations in Oklahoma Territory, whispered Shane. Most of them are, but every once in a while a group will jump the reservation and roam around looking for food or anything to survive on. Should we make a run for it? With that horse? Yeah, I wouldn't make it far. The good thing is they probably don't have rifles, and there's only 2 of them at the moment. That's good? Yeah, they generally won't attack unless they have us outnumbered. Generally? Yeah. How far do you think we are from the town of Tenor? 3, maybe 4 miles. Why? Could your horses make it there without stopping? They could, said Jess as his eyes shifted to his right. Then why don't I jump on Sharps and we hightail it out of here and head for town? Because four more Indians just showed themselves off to our right, and 2 of them have what looks like rifles. Shane nervously looked to the right and saw the 4 sitting on ponies off in the distance. I don't like this, he mumbled. Slide your rifle out and get on Sharps, said Jess as he stopped his horses. Shane moved his horse closer to Sharps and wrapped the reins around his saddle horn. He slid his rifle out and jumped on him without hitting the ground. Jess started walking his horses again, and Shane's horse followed along behind them. What now? Shane asked nervously. Do you know how to shoot a buffalo rifle? I guess so. It shoots just like any other rifle, right? Listen, we don't have much time to talk, so slide it out and chamber a round into it, he said as he handed him several cartridges. Don't bother using the long-range sights. Just line the barrel up with the target. When they're far off, aim higher above their heads and hope for the best. Sharps and Gray will stand still, and you can prop the rifle up on the saddle to steady it. Shane chambered a round in and stuffed the others in his front pocket after sliding his Spencer rifle into the empty scabbard. Do me a favor, he asked Jess. What? If we get overrun, shoot me before they can scalp me, he said. Okay, said Jess, as he lifted the sights on his buffalo rifle and watched the 4 Indians on the right, since two of them had rifles. The 4 on the right will come at us first if they decide to attack. If they do, shoot at the one on the right that has a rifle, and I'll take the one on the left, said Jess. All right, said Shane, just as the 4 Indians to their right started yelping and hollering as their ponies dug in their hooves and started running straight for them. Jess and Shane slid from the saddle and lined up the horses in a straight line. Jess snapped his head around to see the other 2 still sitting on the small rise. He swiveled back around to the 4 who were riding toward them. They're still a good 600 yards out, and I don't want you to fire until they get close, say 300 yards, so don't pull that trigger until I tell you to. Shane nodded and trailed the one with the rifle on the right with the barrel of the gun. Jess stuck his fingers in his mouth and felt the breeze before placing his head against the stock of the rifle and taking aim. When the charging Indian on the left got to within 400 yards, he slowly squeezed back on the trigger until the rifle bucked and boomed. The custom-loaded 375-grain slug sizzled through the air and sliced clean through his throat. The Indian slumped against the neck of his pony and slowly slid off to the ground. He tumbled several times before skidding to a bloody stop. Jess had already chambered another round into his rifle and was aiming at the one with the rifle to his right when all of a sudden the 3 Indians skidded their horses to a halt. Hell of a shot. But what just happened? Why are they stopping? Shane asked. Jess jerked his head around to see that the 2 who had been sitting on the small rise were missing now. Shane, the 2 behind us have disappeared beyond that rise, so you keep your eyes peeled in that direction. Shane ran to the other side of Sharps and propped the rifle up again. You know my backside is out in the open, right? He stammered nervously. Indians are usually lousy shots, and they're still too far out for a normal rifle to do much damage. Usually? Yeah. You sure you know how to confront a man in distress? You sure know how to comfort a man in distress, Shane said as he saw the two Indians round the base of the rise. They've shown themselves, but they're just sitting there. Jess watched the three braves sitting atop their ponies, talking and pointing to where they were. I think they're trying to decide what to do next, he said. What makes you think that? Because they haven't picked up the other rifle yet. Is that a good thing? I think so. Shane wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve, lowered his head for a second, and started whispering something that Jess couldn't make out. Speak louder. I can't hear you, said Jess, as he jerked his head around to see the two sitting atop their ponies by the bottom of the hill. You got to keep an eye on those two. Shane lifted his head back up. I was just praying, he said, as he put his cheek back against the stock of the rifle. I don't think that's going to help much right now. Jess turned his head back to the three who were still waving their arms around and talking. I don't want to get scalped alive. You live by the gun, he said briskly. You risk death every time you face another man in a gunfight. That's different. How so? When I was a kid, I was in a wagon train coming out west when we got attacked by Indians. I have no idea who's talking right now. I watched one of them scalp a man alive right in front of my eyes, and I've had nightmares about it ever since. I think that's Shane. I already agreed to shoot you before that happens. Yeah, a little too quickly, I have to say. All right, then I won't shoot you. No, shoot me. Jess glanced over at him. You'd best make up your mind right quick before they decide what to do next. Why are they just sitting there? Probably sharpening their tomahawks. That is not funny, carped Shane. Jess watched one of the Indians riding his pony over to the dead one on the ground. That's not good, said Jess, as he shouldered his rifle again. What is it? One of them's heading for the rifle on the ground, so get ready for another attack. Damn it, cursed Shane, as he aimed the buffalo rifle at one of the two sitting at the bottom of the small rise. Jess watched the one Indian slip off his pony and use a knife to cut a swath of the loincloth from the dead Indian. He picked up the rifle and tied the cloth to the top of the barrel. He swung back up on his pony and started waving it around in the air. How about that? Muttered Jess as he moved his head up from the stock of the rifle. What's happening? I think they want to parley. Chapter 28. The one Indian rode slowly toward where they were. Shane kept watching the two sitting at the base of the small hill. Jess balanced his buffalo rifle on his saddle and slipped his hammer strap off as the Indian came closer. Shane kept jerking his head around to see the one approaching. Jess saw him as he moved away from Gray. Good morning, Just Ed. Keep your eyes on those two over there, he said, as he pointed to the two sitting by the small hill. I'm just trying to see if he has a tomahawk or a knife on him, he said anxiously. He has both, said Jess. I didn't want to hear that. Then you shouldn't have asked. Do you always have to be so honest? Sorry, it's just my nature to look at things the way I see them. Shane cursed something unintelligible under his breath as he continued to keep the rifle trained on one of the two Indians he was watching. The lone Indian stopped his horse 10 feet away from where Jess stood. Jess noticed some of the markings on the Indian's face. They reminded him of Red Moon's painted face the night he tried to drown himself in the lake. Are you Cheyenne? I am. How could you tell? He asked in perfect English. I escorted a Cheyenne medicine man to his birthplace in Colorado recently. Was he searching for his final destiny? Yes. You know about that? Yes, it's often the way for a medicine man to see his future after death. Who was this medicine man? Red Moon. The Indian lowered his head for a moment before looking back up at Jess. I know of Red Moon, he said. He was a great healer and seer of things to come. Did he meet his final destiny? I'm not sure. I think so. He's still alive, though. At least he was when I left him. Why did you help an Indian? Because he asked for it. But why did you attack us? Because we are starving and haven't been able to shoot any game for food. You've got 2 rifles. Yes, but we have no bullets for them. You have no bullets and you still charged at us? We were desperate and hungry. So you decided to kill us to get bullets? We didn't want to, but our leader said we had to if we wanted to survive. Jess glanced out at the dead Indian on the ground. Was it your leader I shot? Yes, but I did not know a bullet could reach that far. They're special bullets. Magical? I reckon you could say that. So what are you and your little band of Cheyenne warriors going to do next, since you have no bullets and I can shoot them before they can reach me with arrows? I would ask that you give us food and bullets in trade for letting you pass unharmed. I don't have a problem with giving you food. But why should I give you bullets? You'll just kill the next unsuspecting person riding through here, and that will make me partially responsible for it. We could become blood brothers. Me and you? Yes. If we were blood brothers, I could swear an oath to you not to take a life unless defending myself or my honor. I am the new leader of my band, and they will follow me. Slide off your pony, then. You will become my blood brother. Yes, if it will keep you from killing innocent people. The Indian slid from his pony and placed the rifle on the ground. Jess pulled his bowie knife out as the Indian walked up to him. Shane twisted his head around nervously. What are you doing? Just keep watching those 2, said Jess without taking his eyes off the Cheyenne warrior. He used his bowie knife to make a very shallow cut on the palm of his left hand. The warrior placed his right hand palm side up. Jess made a similar cut, and then they clasped their hands together and held them tightly for a full minute. When they released their hands, Jess wiped the blood off on his pants. The warrior didn't wipe his hand off. Now you must tell me your wishes, he said. My brother will not kill any innocent people for any reason other than to protect his life or the life of his band. In return, I will give you all the food we have, plus a horse that you can slaughter for meat. And bullets? I will give you 20 bullets so you and your warriors can hunt game for food. You're actually going to give them bullets? Shane asked, with a troubled look on his face now. Shane, empty our saddlebags and drop everything on the ground in a pile, including the 2 canteens on Sharps, Jess told him. I'm not sure this is a good idea, especially giving them bullets, grumbled Shane as he started emptying the saddlebags on Sharps and Gray while still holding the buffalo rifle in his left hand. When he finished, he started walking toward his horse. Forget about your horse, Shane, Jess said. I gave him to my new brother. You gave him my horse? You'll be getting a new one in town anyway. Shane walked back to Sharps and propped the rifle up on the saddle again. Jess removed the buffalo rifle that still sat on Gray's saddle. He handed the rifle to the warrior, who took it and looked it over. Hi, Jacob Castro. Welcome to the chat. This shoots the magic bullets? Yes. It only shoots 1 round at a time and can hit game from far away. Show me how to load and shoot it, he said, as he handed the rifle back to him. Jess took time to show him how to use the sights on it, and he had him fire the rifle 3 times at a small tree about 200 yards away. When he finished, he handed the Indian 20 of the custom-loaded cartridges. Shane kept jerking his head back and forth between the 2 Indians at the base of the hill and Jess. How much longer is this going to take? He asked. Jess looked over at him. Hand me that rifle, he said. But what about those 2? He asked as he pointed to the 2 Indians he had been watching all along. They're not going to do anything now. Even if they did, I'm a much better shot. Shane handed the buffalo rifle to him and stood there shifting about nervously. Jess turned to the Indian again. We are going to leave now. I ask that you and your warriors wait until we're out of sight before you take the offering I have given you." "It is agreed," he said as he bowed his head slightly. Jess and Shane climbed up in the saddle on Sharps and Gray. Jess nudged Gray into a slow walk, with Sharps following behind. Shane's horse started to follow, but the Indian grabbed the bridle and stopped him. Shane moved Sharps up next to Jess. "So you're a blood brother with the Cheyenne warrior now?" "Yeah. It was the only way to make sure they didn't kill anyone else." "Well, we have to get more supplies and a new horse," Shane said as he turned in the saddle to see the Indians looking through the supplies and food they'd left them. The one holding the buffalo rifle in his hand was staring back at him. "Quit eyeballing him. Just making sure they ain't coming back after us. He might take it as a sign that I don't trust him." "Well, I sure don't." "Look on the good side of things." "Like what? Giving my horse away, or you giving them a rifle and ammunition so they could shoot us?" "None of that," chuckled Jess. "At least you can still get a haircut." "That wasn't funny," he groused as they rode around a bend in the trail and out of sight. A few seconds later, they heard a single gunshot. "What was that?" asked Shane. "Probably shot your horse." "Better than shooting me," he muttered as Jess picked up the pace, putting the horse into a moderate gallop toward the town of Tenor. Chapter 29. Everett T. Booker and Rudolph Springmeyer rode slowly along the main street in Tenor in the afternoon. Booker was a seasoned gunslinger who drifted from town to town looking for the next big challenge so he could put another notch on the butt of his Navy Colt. The 6 notches he already had were worn and dirty, and he was getting impatient to get his 7th. Booker hardly ever smiled. He had a cross look permanently plastered to his face. The scar on his right cheek made him look even angrier. His friend, Rudolph Springmeyer, wasn't near as fast as Booker. He was learning how to shoot and following in Booker's footsteps. Of course, in his mind, he was faster than he actually was, which made him just as dangerous as Booker. They saw the empty jail, and Booker simply grunted as they rode by it. They knew the town didn't have any law now, except for the occasional visit from one of the county's sheriff's deputies. They rode their horses to the livery to stable them. The young man working there walked out with a smile on his face. "Afternoon, gents," he said. "We ain't gents," growled Booker. "You want to keep them stabled overnight?" "You keep them stabled until we tell you different," said Booker. "Our weekly rate is cheaper than the daily rate," announced the worker. Booker turned to him and slapped the man hard on his face, open-handed. "Who said anything about us paying?" The young man stumbled backward and put his hand up to his face, his smile gone now. You'll have to take it up with the owner," said the young man, as he felt the welts already starting to form. "He's over at the saloon, down the street." "I'll do that," said Booker, as he took his rifle and saddlebags and headed out of the livery with Springmeyer following behind him. When they pushed through the bat wings of the saloon, everyone turned to look at them. Booker put his things on a table and gestured with his finger for the barkeep to come over. When the barkeep reached the table, Booker snatched the man by his shirt and pulled him close enough that he could smell Booker's horrid breath. "Bring us a bottle and 2 glasses, and make it fast," he told him before releasing his grip. "Yes, sir," said the barkeep. "Now, who owns a livery down the street?" An old man sitting at a table with another man slowly raised his right hand. I own the livery you mentioned," he said. Booker's right hand moved like desert lightning as he drew his pistol and fired one shot. The slug punched a hole clean through the man's hand. He wailed and grabbed it with a white cloth napkin. Everyone in the place fell silent. "Why the hell'd you do that?" squealed the livery owner. "Because that dim-witted young man at your livery started to tell me how much it would cost to board my horse there, and I slapped him red. Now, are you going to tell me how much it costs?" The man held his hand close to his chest. Uh, Free? The man said nervously. Booker glanced over at the barkeep with an inquisitive look on his face as he slowly thumbed the hammerback. And the whiskey, food, and rooms? He asked as he raised his eyebrows. On the house, sputtered the barkeep. Sounds fair to me, Booker said as he replaced the spent shell and holstered his pistol. Now, my name is Everett T. Booker, and we're going to stay in 2 of the rooms upstairs until I can find someone who can go up against me in a gunfight. So I gotta ask, is there anyone in here right now who wants to take the challenge? No one said a word. Bunch of lily-livered cowards, he said as he sat down at his table. Springmeyer jutted out his jaw and he looked around the room. Anyone want to challenge me? He demanded. The complete silence was his answer. Inwardly, he was glad no one took him up on it. Truth be told, he garnered more of his courage from being around Booker. He sat down and poured whiskey into 2 glasses. You're right, boss. Bunch of cowards, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. They sat there the rest of the night, drinking free whiskey and eating free food because no one was brave enough to charge them for anything. Jess and Shane rode into the town of Tenor about 2 hours after Booker and Springmeyer arrived. They rode the horses to the livery on Main Street. After climbing out of the saddle and seeing no one inside, Jess called out, Anyone working here? Who is it? Jess Williams and Harvey Shane. Why? The young man appeared at a doorway and looked at them. His face was welted badly, the finger marks fairly evident on his face. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't them other 2 fellas, he said sheepishly. Who gave you that? Asked Jess. One of the men who rode in here a few hours ago. Don't you have any law in town? No, just the deputy county sheriff who comes through here every few weeks or so. Jess removed the wanted posters on the Adair brothers and showed them to him. Are these the 2 who rode in earlier? He asked. The man slowly shook his head. No, but these 2 men came through here a few days ago, he said. They didn't stay long and they killed 2 drifters before they left. Paid me my fee and bought 2 fresh horses. Didn't have any problem with them. The 2 that rode in a few hours ago, what do they look like? You can't miss 'em, he said. The one who slapped me is so ugly and mean-looking, even his mama couldn't give him a kiss goodnight. Take good care of my horses, and pick out the strongest piece of horse flesh you have available for my friend, said Jess as he pitched him a $10 gold piece. Make sure he can run fast and for long distances. I've got just the mount for you, but he ain't cheap, he said as he finally smiled. Don't worry, he can afford it, Jess told him as he nodded to Shane. I can pay whatever price you want, Shane assured him. Exactly how long ago did the 2 on the wanted poster leave out of here? Asked Jess. Oh, I'd say about a day and a half. Thanks, said Jess as he turned to leave. Hey, wait a minute, said the worker. Did you say your name was Jess Williams? The bounty hunter they write about in them dime novels? That would be me. The young man slowly smiled and nodded his head. Why do you find that amusing? Asked Jess. Oh, nothing, he said as his smile widened. Nice to have you in town, Mr. Williams. Thanks, said Jess as he and Shane walked out. The livery worker walked to the large doors and watched them walking toward the saloon down the street. Try slapping him red and see what happens, he muttered to himself before going in to take care of the horses. Oh, try slapping him red and see what happens, he muttered to himself before going back in to take care of the horses. Inflection makes all the difference. Chapter 30. This is the last one, guys. Jess and Shane headed for the saloon. Shane glanced back at the livery for a moment. What do you think all that was about? He asked. You mean the livery worker? Yeah, why is he smiling so much after realizing who you were? Not sure, but I have a hunch it might have something to do with the man who slapped him. You think we'll have trouble with the 2 men who rode in before us? I reckon we're about to find out, he said, as he took the steps up to the boardwalk, slipping his hammer strap off as he did. Shane removed his and let Jess go through the bat wings first. Before the swinging doors finished clacking together, every set of eyes was upon them as the place fell silent again. Booker was staring directly at Jess and making a mental note of his weapons. His gaze finally rested on the strange-looking pistol and the holster that cradled it. Springmeyer was looking at Shane. "Well, if it ain't the great Harvey Shane, gunslinger, gambler, and cheat," he spat. Shane smiled at him. "Rudolph Springmeyer. Worst card player I ever met. No, wait a second. I once played a hand against a dead man after a shootout in a saloon. He might have been a little worse, but not by much." "Kiss my ass, Shane," grumbled Springmeyer. Jess watched Booker as he slowly made his way to the bar. Shane stayed by the batwing doors on purpose, his right hand close to the butt of his pistol. The barkeep moved over to Jess. "What can I get you, mister?" he asked. "Good whiskey for me and my friend over there by the door." The barkeep poured some whiskey into 2 glasses. He set one in front of Jess, who was turned sideways at the bar, and he ran the other one over to where Shane was standing. Booker watched everything with interest, especially the fine bottle of whiskey on the bar. The barkeep started walking back to the bar, but Booker stuck his foot out and tripped him. He fell to the floor on his hands and knees. What'd you do that for?" he asked sheepishly. "For serving me this coffin varnish when you had good whiskey behind the bar," he said as he threw the whiskey at his face. The barkeep rolled over on his rear and used his shirt to wipe the whiskey from his eyes. "Now go and get that bottle for me," he growled. The barkeep scrambled to his feet. Jess and Shane exchanged glances, both of them smiling knowingly as they did. When the barkeep went to reach for the bottle, Jess put his left hand on it, but he never broke his gaze away from Booker. "Mister, I really need that bottle," the barkeep said anxiously. "I'm curious," said Jess. "Is that man paying for his whiskey?" No." "So he's drinking for free?" "Yeah." "Do you have another bottle of good whiskey back there?" "No, that's the only one I got." "And how much does it cost?" $5. Jess let go of the bottle, fished around in his pocket with his left hand, and placed a $5 gold piece on the bar. "Consider it sold, and me and my friend need 2 rooms for the night," said Jess as he continued to stare straight at Booker. But I already gave the rooms to those 2 men over there," the barkeep said nervously as he nodded at Booker's table. "I wouldn't worry much about that, because they're not staying anyway," Jess told him firmly. "I'm still waiting on that bottle, barkeep," hollered Booker. "So sorry, but this man just paid for it," he stammered as he backed up against the back of the bar. "I don't give 2 shits if he paid for it or not," barked Booker. "Do you have food in the back?" asked Jess. The barkeep nodded. Just ham sandwiches." "That sounds good," said Jess. "Why don't you go in the back and make 2 sandwiches for me and my friend?" The barkeep stood there, not knowing if he should move or not. Jess shot Shane a knowing look, and Shane turned his attention from Springmeyer to Booker. Jess turned his head toward the barkeep with a resolute look. "Now, you go on back there and make those sandwiches and don't come out with them until it's over with," he told him. The barkeep blinked several times, and then he slowly strolled toward the door, going to the kitchen area. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" demanded Booker as he straightened up in his chair. Jess glanced at Shane again, and Shane turned his attention back to Springmeyer, who had been listening intensely, but not saying anything yet. Jess locked eyes with Booker again. "He's busy, making us something to eat," he told him as he grinned slightly, which only infuriated Booker more. He slowly stood up, revealing his navy Colt with the hammer strap already removed. "I don't know who the hell you think you are coming in here and taking our whiskey and our rooms and—" "The name is Jess Williams," he said, cutting Booker off mid-sentence. "A name don't mean nothing to me," grumbled Booker. Springmeyer recognized the name and he became extremely unsettled as he broke his stare with Shane. As it with Shane. As he broke his stare with Shane. I think that's a typo. And turned toward Booker. Boss, he said. Shut up, Rudolph. Can't you see I'm busy with this hard case? He shouted. But, boss, I said to shut your pie hole, said Booker, as he turned his head slightly toward Springmeyer, who looked back over at Shane, who was smiling widely now. Oh, thank you. Is it Angelia? Angelia, thank you. Booker turned his attention back to Jess. Now that I know your name, I can tell the gravedigger what to put on your headstone, he crowed. The man who owned the livery recognized the name too, and he started to laugh, but he stopped himself abruptly. Booker twisted his neck around and shot him an angry look. You want another hole in the other hand? He asked. Yikes. The man shoved both of his hands below the table, but he still couldn't wipe the smile off his face. No, but I do the grave digging for the cemetery, and it looks like I'm going to make a few bucks tomorrow, he said as he glanced over at Jess. Yeah, because that one there's getting planted tomorrow, said Booker as he glared at Jess, the scar scrunching up on his right cheek as he did. Don't you know who I am? Booker said. Should I? Dang right you should, he asserted boldly. I'm Everett T. Booker. I got 6 notches on my Navy Colt, and you're going to be the 7th. Well, Mr. Booker, I somehow doubt that's how this is going to end, but I do have a suggestion for you and your silent friend there. And what might that be? You and your friend are free to ride out of town. Booker started to say something, but he started laughing instead. It was a heavy belly laugh, and Jess started laughing along with him, which made Booker stop instantly. Are you making fun of me? He demanded. Hey, boss, said Springmeyer. Poor Springmeyer's trying so hard. I'm not telling you again to keep that trap of yours shut, barked Booker. Springmeyer glanced up at Shane again, who was smiling and slowly shaking his head. Springmeyer lowered his eyes to the floor. Jess's face took on a serious look. So I reckon you're not taking me up on my offer about leaving? He asked Booker. First smart thing you've said so far, he said as he moved his right hand close to the butt of his Navy Colt. And now I'm going to shut that smart mouth of yours for good. I'll make sure you get a nice headstone, Jess said politely. I'll make sure they carve a nice message on it for you. It'll say, Here lies Everett T. Booker, proud to have 6 notches on his pistol, and dead because he tried for 7. You smug bastard, Booker growled with a wolfish snarl as he jerked for his Colt. Everything happened at lightning speed. Jess's gun appeared in his hand before Booker lifted his out of his holster. The 2 slugs burned through his chest. Shane had his pistol out and cocked, but Springmeyer made no attempt to reach for his. The force of the 2 slugs lifted Booker up and backward. He fell on the table hard, and it gave way, crashing to the ground. Springmeyer stumbled out of his chair with his hands up and tripped over a leg from the table. As he fell backward onto the floor, the bat-wing doors flew open as Shadow lunged through them. He landed on the floor between Springmeyer's legs and slowly crawled up his torso, baring his fangs and growling. He moved up to his face, parting his front lips to expose his long, heavy front fangs. Springmeyer kept wailing like a scared child as he turned his face sideways. Shadow almost touched his cheek with his teeth. Kara, it's okay. Oh, my Lord, Springmeyer cried as he turned to look Shadow in the face. I'm staring at the face of death, he kept wailing as he held his hands up by his shoulders. Please, somebody, help me. Jess replaced his spent shell and holstered his pistol. Come over here, boy, he said. Shadow stopped growling and lifted his head up to Jess. Then he leapt clean over Springmeyer and walked next to Jess and turned around. Springmeyer was lying there, shaken like a leaf. What the hell was that? He cried. Oh, that was just Shadow, Shane told him. He released the hammer on his pistol. Shadow? He said in a high-pitched voice. Yeah, He's my friend, said Jess as he rubbed Shadow's head. Ah, hell, said Shane as he pinched his nose. What is it? Said Jess. He done soiled himself, he said as he shook his head with a disgusting look. Chapter 31. Actually, we'll do this one and then we'll stop. Hold on, let me see again. I can't remember how many chapters there are. 31, 32, 33, 34. No. We'll stop there. And then we'll have 4 to read next week. All right. Good stuff. Kara, you did step away right at the moment when things got exciting. Such a good book. I'm really, really enjoying it. I hope you guys are. We have a show Friday. If you're new to the chat or new to the channel, it's called the Nurse Penny Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, we don't always stream to YouTube. It depends on what I'm going to be covering, because I don't want to risk copyright strikes. But I'll put up a little video, just a little short video notification if we're not going to stream to Friday. I haven't decided what we're talking about yet. Kind of waiting to see how the Hunter Biden trial shakes out. I don't know, how much more information we're going to get today and then during the day tomorrow. But I mean, it's been kind of a slow news week considering last week was just crazy. But if you missed last Friday's show, go back and watch it. We talked about the 34, what is it called? 34 charges that President Trump was convicted on, and just kind of had a pep talk moment to help everybody get their legs back under him, because it was a tough week for a lot of people. But hopefully we'll be able to broadcast to YouTube. And then I was watching my friend, Red Pill 78. I don't know if you guys watch him. If you don't, he has a great channel. He does news every day at 5, Monday through Thursday. And then he's got a 9 o'clock show on Saturday and Sunday that are interview shows. But Zach was saying that Rumble has a new studio that we can use. So right now, if you don't know much about podcasting, right now you cannot stream directly from Rumble. You have to have some other third-party app. So what is going on there? So I have what's called EV Mux, and I really like it, but it's $45 a month, which is almost $600 a year. And I'm told Rumble Studio is free. So I might look at that this week and do a test broadcast. It'll be private. You won't see it, to see what that looks like. Oh my gosh. So there's a bird feeder, and it is probably, I would say, 6.5 feet from this big shrubbery that my neighbor has. And I saw something crawling on it, and I can't see great with these contacts, as I told you earlier. And I was like, what kind of bird? And so I leaned back and I saw it was a squirrel. And he leapt from that bird feeder over to the bush, and he barely made it. I don't even know how he would have gotten on the bird feeder, because it's like a metal pole. I don't know if they can climb up those. First time I've ever seen that, and we've lived here a long time. But anyway, sorry, squirrel. Got distracted. So I'll let you know on YouTube Friday night if we're not going to stream to YouTube, and I'll post a link so that you can come over here and watch on Rumble, or why not just join Rumble? But I'll be trying out the studio. We'll see if we use that or not on Friday. Just depends on how user-friendly it is. Rumble, as much as I love them for a lot of reasons, squirrel, exactly. As much as I love them, Rumble words all of their instructions to content creators as though we are techies. So it'll be like, enter your SPOF spool rate, or, I'm just making crap up, but that's what it sounds like to me in my brain. And they just make it so difficult. They don't put any videos out on how to use anything they have. Whereas YouTube, you could go to YouTube and, just search a video. In fact, I have to go to YouTube to search for how to do things on Rumble. Rumble needs to kind of get their act together there. And they also have horrible customer service unless you're a huge account. So if you're Dan Bongino or, some of these bigger account holders, you're going to get your questions answered, and you're going to get customer assistance. I mean, if anybody from Rumble listens to this, I send emails to customer service at Rumble, never get answers. It's ridiculous. Most of this platform is smaller content creators, and I just feel like we are totally disregarded. So I don't know if I can get hold of, what is it, Chris? I can't think of the guy's name. Chris think it starts with a P. Maybe I'll try messaging him on, or yeah, I guess messaging. What do you call it on Twitter now that they're not tweets? Xing him? That doesn't seem right. I'll try Xing him on X and see. He, son of a gun. What is he? Okay, I'll have to get this on video. He is climbing that pole. How on earth? He's got what looks like a piece of bread or something. And I mean, those little holes for the birds are maybe this big. And dang if he's not gone in there. What on? All right then. I could X him out for not answering texts. I mean, their customer service department is just terrible. Um, and I think a lot of people, like my friend Zach, and Zach's got a decent size account, but Zach has even commented that, you just can't get any help from him. I don't know why. Chris Pawlowski, something like that, I think. All right, now I'm like totally tore up about this squirrel. I'm going to have to go out and see if I can get some video. But anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. We'll be back here Friday at 4:30 Eastern for the Nurse Penny podcast. We're here every Wednesday at 10:30 Eastern for the book club, and I'll have to get hustling on what we're reading next. Downloaded a couple things. I just do not see us being able to get through Lonesome Dove because I'm going to be gone the week of the 7th through the 12th. So if I do any reading that week, it'll be just a recording. That squirrel is crazy. He is I got to get a video of him. He's on the roof. You're going to fall off. Oh, there he goes. He's going to jump. He's like flying, jumping to this bush. I have to get this on video. All right. I'm going to scoot. I love you guys. A whole big bunches. Say a prayer for me and I'll pray for you guys when I get done here. Talk to you soon. Nurse Penny out.